Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill, the first Texas A&M Power Hour of the 2024 college football season. And for the new Texas A&M fans, this is every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. The boys, kind of get into the weeds within this Texas A&M program. We're still going to preview the games on Sunday. We're still going to react to the games on Saturday. But we're going to have a specific episode where we kind of dive into this Texas A&M program, whether it's going back and watching the film from last Saturday or previewing a massive matchup like we are today against Notre Dame. Really excited for this kind of episode. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Texas A&M fans, the reason we're doing a Texas A&M Power Hour, one, the boys love talking this program, but more importantly, the amount of support y'all have shown the fellas in the middle of the summer as we're talking Texas A&M fall camp and storylines. It's been amazing. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think more importantly, we're getting in keys to the game for Texas A&M against Notre Dame. I know Texas A&M fans have some thoughts. I know you guys have been grinding some of the numbers, grinding a little bit of the film. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section as well in terms of your keys for this football game. And Dill, at some point, you got to simplify this matchup and say Texas A&M needs to dominate the one matchup on the field that I think is the biggest mismatch. And this is that Notre Dame offensive line that will be starting a true freshman at left tackle against the Texas A&M defensive line that I took some heat because I said this Texas A&M defensive unit as a whole might be top 5 in the country. It's because of this Texas A&M defensive line. We have a Notre Dame offensive line that has massive question marks heading into this football game versus Texas A&M defensive line that might be the best unit in the country. Texas A&M needs to overwhelm Notre Dame along the line of scrimmage. That's by far the number one key to this football game.
I think they have a great opportunity to do it, not only for the reasons you kind of mentioned. I mean, Notre Dame's going to be turning over pretty much that whole unit because I think not only do they have to replace NFL-level tackles, but last year their interior offensive line played pretty poorly by Notre Dame standards, and I think they're going to change that unit over too. So you're going to see a lot of fresh faces, and I think Texas A&M's defensive line is almost perfectly designed to deal with indecision along an opposing team's offensive line because you look at how athletic everyone is, and you got a guy like Shamar Turner who's going to be playing on the inside, just freaky athlete, could obviously play defensive end, and then you have two guys in Skirton and Shamar Stewart who I think are about as dangerous as you'll see against the run and being able to get in the backfield and make negative plays. And if they can really, I think, shock that Notre Dame team and set the tone for that whole game and kind of rattle a young, inexperienced offensive line, I think that puts Texas A&M kind of on the fast track to taking this game over.
It goes back to like the Georgia Bulldog method that we saw in 2021. Why was Georgia's defense so good in 2021? Because they had a defensive line that there wasn't a single offensive line in the country that could hang with them.
Us Michigan
fans, we know firsthand, and we go play them in the semifinals of the college football playoffs, an offensive line that we thought was pretty damn good, and Georgia just kind of swallowed us up along the line of scrimmage. It made it virtually impossible for Michigan to run any sort of their offense. When you have a defensive line that can dominate the way Texas A&M can, it's going to make it so hard to run an offense for this Notre Dame program. So you look at the biggest key, and I think one big key, like win on first and second down. If you can stop the run on first and second down, get Notre Dame into those third and long situations where the crowd noise is getting really loud. You have a true freshman at left tackle lined up against one of the best edge rushers in the country, Nick Gordon. That is the recipe for Texas A&M.
And that's where I think you look at a guy like DJ Hicks being such a big part, or him or Brownlow Dindy, one of those kind of reserve guys who I think are a little bit more capable of playing that one tech kind of style, being able to eat up blocks and make it hard to run the ball inside. Because that, I mean, if I'm looking at A&M, that's the only like slight concern I think you have for this game is like, well, if Notre Dame can establish a heavy physical inside the box run game, that's probably their avenue to keeping this Texas A&M defensive line at bay. But again, I think if we can see really good play from Hicks, Brownlow, Dindy, Albert Regis, I just don't see any real avenue Notre Dame has to.
It goes to Texas A&M fans. Texas A&M fans are smart. Like Texas A&M fans talking on the message board saying, hey, our biggest concern is how do we replace a player like McKinley Jackson? I think that is spot on. Like McKinley Jackson wasn't a guy that necessarily filled up the stat sheet, but what his presence was on the inside of the defensive line in terms of just being that fire hydrant, right? Not necessarily tall, but plays with low pads, eats up double teams. That kind of player is something that you're missing. Can DJ Hicks be that guy for Texas A&M in 2024? That kind of is like the missing piece to this Texas A&M defensive line. They're going into number 2, and we kind of talked about this for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is going to try to get Riley Leonard's legs involved. I think that's one of the ways that you can go about dealing with the pass rush, specifically the edge rushers that Texas A&M has. You got to have a game plan for that. And hey, nobody knows quarterback Riley Leonard better than head coach Mike Elko. And so whether that's just being really disciplined in terms of your pass rush lanes and trying to limit the amount of times Riley Leonard can get outside the pocket, or just saying, hey, Torian York or Damian Sanford or Solomon DeShields, whoever's playing that off-ball backer spot, you're spying Riley Leonard. Whatever it is, you have to have an answer, because if there's one way Riley Leonard in Notre Dame's offense can kind of mitigate the elite pass rush that we think Texas A&M is going to have, it's probably getting Riley Leonard's legs involved.
And I think Torian York, to me, is the guy who a lot of that emphasis is going to be put on, just because of how how much control he has the football field. It feels like when he's on it. I mean, just such a savvy player. His eyes are always looking at the right spots. He's filling run lanes in the way you want them filled. I think having a linebacker who, again, only a true sophomore, but has the experience that Torian York has and has like that command of the game that he has, I think goes a long way. And again, kind of mitigating what Mike Denbrock's going to try to do in terms of playing with their eyes and trying to get Riley Leonard involved and forcing Texas A&M to kind of react with maybe playing a little less aggressive with their edge.
Yeah, Torian York he's wise beyond his age. You turn on the film for Torian York as a true freshman, like that guy's been playing college football for 5 years. He's not like the most he ain't no Adrian Cooper athletically, but man, does this kid just understand that sport. And again, when you're going to be spotting the quarterback, you got to be disciplined. You have to, and then when it's time to go make a play, you got to be athletic enough to make the play. Look, Riley Leonard's an athlete. He ain't Jalen Milroe. And so I trust Torian York to kind of make some of those plays if he does need to make them. But then you got to just say, we got to take Riley Leonard's legs at some point out of the equation.
And you don't want to have to do that by kind of taking the leash off of Skirton and Shamar Stewart and some of these other edge rushers, because if they're not playing aggressive, that's a big loss for what A&M's trying to do.
You kind of go back to how Georgia tried to deal with Jalen Milroe in the SEC championship game by telling Mikael Williams or telling Jalen Walker, telling their elite edge rushers to say, hey, don't pin your ears back. Just keep Jalen Milroe in the pocket. You don't want to do that, because that's how you're winning this football game in the first place. So I'm kind of with you. That quarterback spy makes the most sense. Still, the last thing I'll say for defense, you can't give up the big play. I think this applies for both defenses, quite frankly. I think we feel pretty good about, and neither offense is going to be moving the football methodically down this football field. I just don't see it happening. I think whoever wins this football game is able to find that one or two game-changing plays on offense, and that'd be the one concern I have if I'm Texas A&M, where you got a whole new secondary. I mean, you kind of filled it up in the transfer portal. It's a lot of new pieces. Those pieces have to come in and gel. Mike Denbrock's really good at taking advantage of secondaries and busts and breakdown and communication and kind of designing concepts that are a little bit confusing. You look at LSU, how many times they had guys just running scot-free down the field. Mike Denbrock is really good at doing that. That being said, if you're Texas A&M and you play discipline in the back end and don't give up the big play, you probably feel pretty good about your chances here on defense.
It's like, really, you have a lot of guys who've played a ton of football in that back end. Again, like kind of the opposite of almost what you were working with last year, was kind of young, a little bit inexperienced in certain places. I mean, with these transfers, you have guys who have played forever. And then you also just go to Mike Elko and how good he was at Duke of not allowing teams to get over the top of him, even with probably what I'd call far inferior talent. I mean, teams like Florida State or Clemson or those big ACC schools, they weren't routinely hitting big plays down the field on Duke. Duke just, again, Mike Elko, very, very good with those corners, very good with those safeties in designing a scheme that, again, doesn't really create that many busts. And again, we'll have to see it. He'll have it, like kind of what you said. He's taking over a new team that he hasn't had a ton of time to necessarily develop. But everything we've seen from Mike Elko kind of suggests that he's not a guy who his defense don't give up.
It goes back to late December when Mike Elko took the job. Like, what was the one thing we were most excited for? Is just a more disciplined football team. You kind of trust that with Mike Elko. Now, excuse me, Dill, moving to the offensive side of the football here. I think that, and this is tough, right? Because we talked about the same way with Notre Dame as it is, especially with this Notre Dame defense. You got to give credit where it's due. This is an elite Notre Dame defense that does not have many holes in it. One potential thing that we both talked about last night was they're young at the linebacker spot, right? They have a graduate in Jack Kaiser, but outside of that, it's freshmen and sophomores. What does Colin Klein do very well? Why was he so successful at Kansas State? It was misdirection. It was eye candy in the backfield. It was getting these linebackers to take false steps and have their eyes in the wrong spots. Can you challenge the eyes of these young Notre Dame linebackers? These young Notre Dame linebackers are legit, right? Kingston Williamusa, Derek Bowen, they very good football players, but they're young. Can Colin Klein, whether it's pre-snap motion, whether it's RPO, whether it's jet sweeps, whatever it is, can you get to the eyes and the discipline of this Notre Dame linebacker room? That's probably the avenue I see for Texas A&M having some success on the offensive side of the football.
And again, I think a lot of that kind of goes to how good is Mike Elko. I think we've kind of heard some good things about his playmaking ability. I almost kind of wonder, that's the one thing I'm looking for from A&M is, do they have that playmaking slot guy like a Brooks from Kansas State, who is such a dangerous weapon for that Kansas State team? I feel like he set up a lot of that attacking of the middle of the field, attacking the seam with their tight ends. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. Do they have that guy in the slot who can make it happen, be a playmaker, and set some of that work up the seam that Colin Klein likes to work on with the tight ends and other receivers?
Talk about getting to the discipline of Notre Dame's defense. Terry Bussey. I think there was a reason Terry Bussey wasn't included on the depth chart for Texas A&M, the official depth chart. Hey, we don't want Notre Dame knowing we're going to trot out Terry Bussey. I would be willing to bet that we see Terry Bussey take some offensive snaps. And it might be a little bit gimmicky, but that's kind of how you want to move the football. Again, one or two big plays can win you this football game on offense. If you can get Terry Bussey 2 plays where he has the opportunity to change this football game, I'm doing it. Now, I think the second thing I want to talk about here, and again, it's hard to move the football on this Notre Dame defense. You got to be able to find your matchups. And one of the things that I look at for Notre Dame, and I was kind of doing some reading, looking at some of the PFF numbers and said, hey, Notre Dame was elite in coverage on the boundary, right? They just, not a lot of teams completed a lot of passes on this Notre Dame secondary, but when they did, Notre Dame wasn't great at tackling in space. And so there's 2 things that come to my mind. One, you want to take this Notre Dame pass rush out of it, right? This is a Notre Dame defensive line that we think has the advantage against Texas A&M's. So you want to get the ball out quick. And then if you can dial up some plays where you're getting the football to your playmakers in space and forcing these defensive backs who are damn good. Benjamin Morrison, he missed 18% of his tackles last year. Xavier Watts missed 17. Can you get the football out quick to your playmakers in space and then let them generate those explosive plays? That's probably another avenue where you can generate some plays on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, and I think that's like, you kind of have to do a little bit of that, because I just don't see A&M being able to drop back and kind of throw it and sit in the pocket for a particularly long time, just because I kind of look that front 4 for Notre Dame. We're talking a top 5 unit. I think they give A&M a run for their money. I think they give Michigan a run for their money. I think they give Ohio State a run for their money. Howard Cross might be one of the best defensive linemen, period, in the country, and dealing with him is a handful in his own right. So I think you're kind of right. The ball's got to get out quickly, and then at the end of the day, A&M needs their playmakers to make a couple plays. I don't like that. When you talk about simplifying this game down, we can talk about trying to create a scheme that allows them to get a little bit of space, but at the end of the day, someone's going to need to make something happen, just because I don't see that glaring mismatch that A&M can kind of just march down the field.
I agree, and I would probably point to Noah Thomas. You talk about a guy that you want to see more consistency from Noah Thomas, but you've seen him make some plays that make a jaw drop. Like, can Noah Thomas come up with one of those plays? Maybe it's in the red zone. Maybe it's on a deep shot to kind of change this football game. Probably what you're looking for, Dill. It's a battle of 2 elite defenses with offenses specifically on the offensive line that we have question marks about. I think it makes for a phenomenal game. The reason I'm going with Texas A&M here, they're at home. This is going to be a rowdy environment for the Mike Elko era getting kicked off. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.